The Great Reset is upon us. And at Whole Woman, we're doing our part to turn it into the Great Refusal. Refusal to any longer accept a system that has absolutely gone mad with power and control. And at Whole Woman, we know a thing or two about power and control. The Whole Woman work was started over 30 years ago when I was talked into a senseless and anatomically misconceived surgery that resulted in an immediate and profound uterine prolapse. So we've lost our knowledge. Women have lost our knowledge about our bodies. 500 years ago, with the dawn of the scientific age, women were no longer allowed to practice their natural medicine. And we lost our knowledge base of pregnancy, childbirth, even natural food. And we became very vulnerable and dependent upon a system, a male-dominated medical system that to this day does not even have the core anatomy of the female body right. But I'd like to use the condition of pelvic organ prolapse as an example to talk about just how deeply women have been failed by the modern Western medical system. And I'll start by talking about just what a perfect and beautifully developed, evolved system the human female body truly is. And it is a profound truth that we are horizontal creatures from the hips down and vertical from the waist up. And that is made possible by a profound lumbar curvature that is actually more pronounced in females as it is in males. We have three what are called wedged lumbar vertebrae. They're taller in front and shorter in back. That's what makes the curvature. And males only have two of those. And we need a lot of curvature to balance the weight, the huge weight of pregnancy out front. So what happens actually, and it's a long anatomical story that is deeply, deeply described in the Whole Woman courses, but eventually, once we stand up and start running and cartwheeling through life, that lumbar curvature forms a ceiling over the pelvis, and it sends these tremendous bursts of internal pressure, intra-abdominal pressure that we create every time we take a breath in. Not to mention coughing, sneezing, carrying babies and bags of groceries. And that internal pressure goes through the abdomen and pelvis in a very specific pathway. And it keeps our pelvic organs placed right behind the lower belly, where they are protected from these forces that are moving eventually out the back. We don't have a pelvic floor. We actually have a bony pelvic floor, the pubic bones, the strong pubic bones that come together underneath the body, and any woman can feel this in about 2 seconds. We have a muscular wall at the back. And the female body has just been so very compromised. And the first cut, this design would work beautifully for the rest of our lives, and prolapse and incontinence wouldn't be the most common women's health conditions on the planet if we were allowed to, if the body was treated well, and if we lived in ways that supported our original design. But if you could just imagine what kind of just mistaken and really cruel mindset would cut whole generations of women routinely. Women during childbirth what kind of, perspective would have them cut from the back of the vaginal opening all the way to the anal sphincter? As I said, during childbirth. It was never, ever necessary. That may have to happen in emergency situations, but it's very rare. And we know this because of the work of classic midwives like Ina May Gaskin. And it was, less than 1% of naturally birthing women required episiotomy, or that first cut. But importantly, the vagina has a sphincter, and that vaginal sphincter, once it's cut through, just like the anal sphincter, it can never be repaired. Those muscles retract, and they can never sustain being sutured back together. So women actually do that, and this really speaks to the strength of the original human female design. Women do okay, they do pretty well for some years after one or two big episiotomies, but it really weakens the mast of the ship, so to speak. And the first sign of trouble, not always, but often, is stress urinary incontinence, when you lose a little bit of urine when you cough or sneeze. And that is responded to by our modern medical system by implanting a strip of plastic mesh in between the front vaginal wall and the urethra, the tube that urine is released from. And if you can imagine how much torture that has caused women, it was developed in the 1990s. It's always been a diabolical surgery. It's never worked, but by law, they are still implanting those in women left and right. So eventually, then the organs are pulled back from the abdominal wall. I'm talking about the uterus, the bladder, and they bulge into the vaginal space. And it's uncomfortable. And so the medical response to that is to either suspend the organs to the back of the body, not the front of the body, in the direction that nature is trying to push them with every breath we take, but suspend them to the back of the body, or in the case of the uterus, take it out altogether with hysterectomy. And it is the uterus with its broad mesentery. It's called a ligament. It's not a ligament. It's a mesentery, like the mesenteries that adhere the bowel, the colon, to the abdominal walls. It's a thick, very thick, huge connective tissue structure. When all of that is gone, there is no longer this separation between the abdominal and pelvic cavities. So the loops of small bowel fall down and take the place of the uterus, and women then become subject to something that cannot happen in a woman who has her uterus, and that is vaginal evisceration, where the guts literally spill out of the vaginal space. So it's talked about as being rare through the decades of hysterectomy. We really don't know how rare, because these kinds of records, they're just not kept. But it happens. It happens to a significant number of women. And this is why, the ultimate solution is to sew the vagina up and sew the pelvic wall together. But even that, and my first book, Saving the Whole Woman, it actually ended with a case study of an older woman who she had lost her uterus, had all the surgeries that often come after that, trying to make the vagina smaller, tighter, stronger, to hold up everything inside. That, again, that a woman with her uterus really is not subject, to that level of prolapse. She had had all of those surgeries, and she was having a bowel movement one day and felt this horrible pain, and she had lost several yards of her small bowel, eviscerated out of this vagina that had been surgically closed. This is an emergency and life-threatening situation that has to be responded to surgically. And there's another much more common condition called vaginal vault prolapse, and it's really a euphemism, because what it is describing is that same thing but the top of the vagina that's been surgically closed after hysterectomy, it hasn't opened, so it hasn't allowed the bowels to spill out. But because there's nothing on the other side of on the other side of the top of the vagina to prevent intra-abdominal pressure from literally turning the vagina inside out, it results in this enormous, and we're talking about a softball or even larger than that bulge containing part of the bladder, part of the bowel, and a significant length of the small intestine. Vaginal vault prolapse. When my book was published in 2003, the percentage of women who were said to have that condition was 43%. And I recently looked it up, and that 43% is still being quoted in the medical literature and the recent medical statistics. So, it's not just a few women, and you have to understand that there is no surgical cure for these conditions. The more tissue they take, the more vulnerable women become to severe and life-threatening sorts of prolapse. So, we have this beautiful structure. It never occurs to the medical system to gently try to, encourage the organs forward where they belong. They belong in the lower belly. The pelvic organs are supported by the lower belly, not a pelvic floor. It never occurs to doctors to try to work with the natural anatomy of the female body, because it's not acknowledged by them. So, the best we can do is to trust our body, trust nature, learn about how we're built and how we can come back from these conditions naturally, using the strength of our own spine, and stay out of the doctor's office for the rest of our lives. The great refusal. Say no.